Welcome back to the Kev BKA Beloved podcast. I'm your host, Kev BKA Beloved. On today's show, we got, are the Ravens the number one team in the NFL? Can C.J. Stroud win MVP? And I question if y'all actually enjoy watching basketball. But first, today's opening monologue was going to be titled In Defense of the Patriot Way. I have it written up and everything. It's still in the drafts. Maybe one day I'll do it because very literally, right as I hit send on last week's podcast to publish it, Josh McDaniels got fired from the Oakland Raiders, which led to the inevitable everyone saying, oh, the Patriot way is dead. It only worked because of Tom Brady. And, you know, the Patriots also aren't great right now. So everyone's just piling on and piling on and piling on. So me, as a lifelong Patriots fan, I was going to come on here, stamp my flag, and defend my Patriots, right? But then on Sunday, Jay Glazer releases a story saying that the Raiders had a team meeting where it was the players and the coaches, and the players aired all their grievances about Josh McDaniels. And Antonio Pierce, who is now the current head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, who also was the starting linebacker of the 2007 Super Bowl winning New York Giants. That is an important fact for later. He comes in as a proxy for Josh McDaniels because obviously the players don't want to hear from that nigga in the middle of this meeting. And they're like, and so he's trying to calm them down, and he begins to tell them the story of the 2007 Giants, saying we thought we could beat anybody. We had to have this mindset. We had to make a run. We lost 4 straight. Telling the story of that team that obviously ended up beating the then 18-0 Patriots in the Super Bowl. Josh McDaniels was the offensive coordinator on that 18-0 Super Bowl team. So, in fairness to Josh McDaniels, was Antonio Pierce being a touch tone deaf there? Yeah, but the man only won 1 Super Bowl. He can only go off of what he knows, right? After Antonio Pierce gives that speech, Josh McDaniels goes up to him and says, "Don't ever talk about the Patriots like that again." And all the peace and unity that they just built up by way of Antonio Pierce bringing the team together, all that went out the window because Josh McDaniels cared more about the Patriot way than actually bringing his team together. He was then fired the next day. So seeing as defending the Patriot way didn't turn out too well for Josh McDaniels, I will also not be defending the Patriot way today. Instead, I will be defending Caleb Williams. Now, our good brother Caleb Williams, for those that don't know, which I don't know why you'd be listening to a sports podcast, which is mainly about football if you don't know who Caleb Williams is, but whatever. Number 1 quarterback prospect, arguably the most generational best quarterback prospect to ever live. Essentially Mahomes 2.0, except he's a lot more efficient already coming out of college. Great quarterback. Unless his arm falls off, he will be the number 1 pick. A lot of you have gotten really weird with your critiques of Caleb Williams. I clocked it early because whenever the number 1 quarterback prospect is a black man, it always gets weird with the critiques. The only exception was with Bryce Young, and the only reason Bryce Young didn't get the weird critiques was because the number 2 and 3 quarterback prospects were also black. So you couldn't criticize all 3 of them for the weird critiques. Oh, Kevin, you're just making stuff up. You're making everything to be the race card. Okay, first of all, the history of number 1 overall picks being black quarterback starts with Michael Vick in the year 2000. Starts. The NFL is over 100 years old, and the first number 1 pick as a quarterback was 23 years ago. That already starts it there. Coming out, oh, he doesn't have the skill to read NFL defenses, work ethic, all the buzzwords and dog whistles about Michael Vick. Let's take it 11 years later. Cam Newton came out, and I don't know if you guys remember the Cam Newton Sports Illustrated cover when he was on there with Jake Locker and Blaine Gabbert, and the title was "You Choose the World's Hardest Decision." I'm pulling it up right now, which is why I'm currently not looking at the camera. If you're looking at it on the video, it was "You Choose What a Tough Decision." Blaine Gabbert and Jake Locker, I don't even think started a 10th of the games Cam Newton did. And Cam Newton is one of the greatest college football players to ever live. MVP, took a team to the Super Bowl where his best receiver was me. Like, Cam Newton's awesome, is what I'm trying to say. Lamar Jackson won the goddamn Heisman. They tried to make him play everything but quarterback, and he was a pick away from not even being a first-round draft pick. Need I go on, or do you get my point? So naturally, Caleb Williams started losing some games, and everyone wants to jump on his case and start blaming him for everything. But I'm here to add some context. Caleb Williams has lost 6 games his entire career at USC. I'm going to run through those 6 games for you. Ready? If you're watching on the video, a nice pretty little graphic I made is going to show up on the screen. If you're listening through audio or you're just not looking at the screen right now, don't worry, I got you. So Saturday, November 4th, they lost to number 5 Washington 52-42. How did Caleb Williams do? 27 for 35, 312 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a rushing touchdown. That's pretty good. They lost to Utah, 34-32. Caleb Williams was 24 for 34, 256 passing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, no passing touchdowns, 0 interceptions. But if you watch that game, you know it was a lot of drive down to the goal line, run the ball in, and things of that nature. They lost to Notre Dame. No excuses here, other than the offensive line for USC did not bring their big boy draws for this game, so rightfully they got smacked. But that score was 48-20. Caleb was 23 for 37, 199 yards, 62.2% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 3 picks, sacked 6 times, and I believe he fumbled once as well. Not great. Not a great showing from our guy. Lost his bowl game last year to Tulane, 46-45. 37 of 52, 462 passing yards, 71.2% completion percentage, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. Pac-12 championship against Utah, lost 47-24, 28 for 41, 362 passing yards, 68.3% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, sacked 7 times. And then the first loss to Utah last season, 43-42, 25 for 42, 381 passing yards, 59.5% completion percentage, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, sacked 4 times. In those 6 losses, his defense gave up an average of 45 points a game. And how did Caleb do in those games, you ask? How's 328 yards on average, 68% completion percentage, and a touchdown to interception ratio of 12-5. Come on now. What more do you want? What more can this man possibly do? Like, come on now. And a bulk of the criticism is he gets the comparisons to Mahomes, which if you watch the film and watch him play, the comparison's clearly there. But everyone's comparing him to Mahomes now that we see year 7 or 8 into the NFL. But if you compare him to Mahomes in college, it's night and day. It's not even close. We're complaining about 6 losses for Caleb. Patrick Mahomes was 13-19 at Texas Tech. Didn't even smell a Heisman. But the way the game has progressed now, we see a lot of those Mahomes traits in Caleb, and he's also more efficient, and he actually wins games. So these scouts are not making this same mistake twice. They're going to get them a Caleb Williams. They're going to make that happen. Speaking of scouts, though, I heard a couple concerning scouting reports, quote unquote, from some of these experts on Twitter, and I have to address them. Right? So after the Utah loss this season, the camera focused on Caleb Williams after the game-losing score that Utah scored, and it showed Caleb Williams' stone-faced, emotionless face on the bench for what seemed like forever. And the next day, all the headlines, oh, Caleb didn't show any emotion. He's already checked out. He's already ready to go to the NFL. All that nonsense, right? Okay, I firmly disagree, but no doubt, that's how you feel. I can't change your mind. 2 weeks later, he loses to Washington this weekend. He goes into the stands and cries in his mother's arms. Luckily, his mom was smart enough to put the paper over his face so we couldn't see him crying, but we all knew he was crying, right? Now he's too emotional to lead a locker room. How could he be a leader of men if he cries after a loss? How could he handle the emotions of an NFL season? Hey, yo, check this out. Caleb Williams went into that game with absolutely nothing to play for. He could tell the whole Pac-12 to suck his dick tomorrow, and he will still be the #1 pick in the draft next year. That's just facts. They already had 2 losses. There's no way they were getting into the college football playoff anyways. And more than likely, he's not going to win the Heisman anyways with 2 losses. He was out there for shits and giggles and for the sake of his teammates. And he still cared enough about the game to cry in his mother's arms on national TV after the game. And that's a negative? You don't want that from your quarterback? I do. I want my quarterback to care that much. And then what really bothers me about that is you can't feel like both. You got to pick a side. You got to pick what side of the argument that you're on. And then there's the leak stories. And this is what really bothers me because media literacy is at an all-time low and it's legitimately affecting this 21-year-old kid's life. The story about how he wants partial ownership in whatever team drafts him was proven as false in July when Mike Florio first reported the story. But somehow a couple months later, these aggregate Twitter accounts, which if you don't know what an aggregate account is, it's basically one of these accounts that might as well be run by a bot that take little quotes and clips and little pieces of articles, tweet out one little sentence and put a little picture graphic at the bottom and maybe tag the person the article comes from. They almost never link the actual article, and because no one's actually gonna look it up and read, they just take that little quote on face value and they run with it. So one of the aggregate accounts tweets out Caleb Williams wants ownership, and all of a sudden the story starts to circulate again, and nobody cares about the truth when the lie is more entertaining. So now the subject of discussion is Caleb Williams wants to own a team when it was already proven as false months ago. And then the other story was he has a list of teams that he wants to go to. That never came from a reputable source. More importantly, it never came from him or anyone in his immediate circle. So more than likely, that's bullshit as well. But here's the kicker, right? Here's the real kicker. Let's live in fairy tale land, hypothetical land, and let's say both of those things are true. Let's say Caleb goes to Indianapolis for the draft combine day and says, I want partial ownership of the team that drafts me, and I only want to go to insert teams here. So what does that have to do with you in particular, weird college fan, that you work a 9-to-5 job? You have a CDL. What does Caleb wanting ownership of the team have to do with you? If Caleb wants a piece of ownership, that's a Robert Kraft, Mara family, Runa family problem. That's not a your family problem. Like, why do you care as an individual? What does that have to do with you? And trying to pick out his own team, if you're applying for a job and you know somebody that works at that job or has worked at that job before, and they tell you, hey, bruh, the culture at that job is awful. The boss is this. The workload is going to be this. The facilities, blah, 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 blah. Don't go there. Don't apply there. You're not going to take that job, are you? Well, in the scope of athletes, they don't have a choice. If they get drafted somewhere, they have to go. The only people who have the freedom is undrafted free agents. How does that apply to Caleb Williams, you might ask? Cliff Kingsbury is currently the senior offensive analyst for the USC Trojans, which is a made-up title for I'm here to help Caleb Williams out if he has any questions. Cliff Kingsbury was the head coach of the Cardinals, who before the season, everyone thought was going to end up tanking and end up being the number one pick. As it currently stands, they have one win, thanks to Josh Dobbs beating the Cowboys. Shout out to him. He also just won this week. We'll get to him later. But Kyler Murray's coming back, and I'm pretty sure he's not too keen on the idea of I'm going to go out here and lose all these games, so I got to go move and get traded somewhere else. Pretty sure he's going to go win some games. So the Cardinals are ruled out. But I bring up the Cardinals to say, if they thought that was going to end up being the number one pick, and Cliff Kingsbury knows it's some bullshit over there, which every other report has already said that the Cardinals facility has some bullshit going on over there. Go read any of the articles. Just look up Cardinals workplace practices, and literally hundreds of articles will come up. You don't have to look very far. So if he knows this, why wouldn't he tell the guy he's working with every day that can possibly end up at that job? You see how once you take the actual athlete out and you start looking at them as a person, these things start to make more sense. And now let's bring the athlete back into it. If they end up going to a shitty job culture, they can end up getting hurt and physically maimed for the rest of their life. If I end up at a shitty job culture, I'm just gonna hate going to work every day. It's a very different dynamic we're dealing with here. But that's about it, man. That's about it. But my closing argument will just be simply this. If any of the critiques of Caleb Williams legitimately bothers you, and there are some that are valid, like, hey, Caleb, you don't have to be Superman every play. Sometimes throw it to your check down. You don't have to run out the pocket the moment it collapses. Hang in there, buddy. He says he's 6'1". He might be 6 feet tall with shoes on. I look at him, he looks a little small sometimes. Legitimate critiques. But if you're worried about some of the other things I named earlier, and it's, oh, he paints his nails, oh, he's this, oh, he's that, and your team ends up passing on him, and he spends the next 15 years busting your team's ass because he passes on them, good luck to you, because you deserve it. Take a quick break, and we'll be right back with the questions. All right, everybody, welcome back. We're going to get to the Week 9 edition of NFL Ask Me Anything. Once again, thank you, everybody, for sending in your questions this week. If you want to submit your questions, go ahead. Before the Monday Night Football game, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and now when this podcast goes out, there'll be a nice little question tab on Spotify that'll ask you to put your question in for next week, and then maybe you'll appear in this video. I'm going to try to limit it to 5 a week because last week's just went way too long. Submit your questions in, and if I don't answer it in the video, I will answer you directly in real life, and we'll go from there. Before I get to the questions, I have to address the elephant in the room. If you're watching this on video, I have glasses on now because for whatever whatever reason, when I did the intro and I was looking back at it, I looked incredibly cross-eyed. No shade to cross-eyed people. I like Notorious B.I.G. too. But I've had the same face and same eyes for 26 going on 27 years of my life. I've recorded almost 450 videos, probably more by now. And not a once have I ever looked cross-eyed in any of them. So I don't know what happened. And until we get that figured out, y'all gonna get the Ocho Cinco look for now. And honestly, one, these joints will fly, so I might just keep them for all of eternity. And secondly, these are the same type of glasses I have on in the podcast logo if you go look at them. So it kind of works out. Anyways, let's get to the question. Question number 1, are the Ravens the favorite to win it all? So the easy answer is that it's the Eagles because they have the best record in the league. But I got 2 concerns. One, they have a gauntlet coming up for the rest of their season. And if you've looked at Jalen Hurts, that knee, there's something going on with that left knee. He got the brace under the leggings. He got a gimpy in the Cowboys game. There's something going on. And because this is a team that wants to win the Super Bowl and they're not really playing for regular season success that much, obviously they want the 1 seed and they want the road to Vegas to go through the link. At some point, Jalen Hurts is going to miss a game or 2. You can just go ahead and mark that down now. That doesn't make me Nostradamus or Negrodamus. That's just gonna happen, right? So that leaves 2 to 3 other teams. Well, 2 and a possible. Let's play spades. Ravens, Chiefs, maybe the Bengals. Now, there are some teams that I have left off. The Miami Dolphins, if you watch the Chiefs game, I feel like I shouldn't have to explain that one. Until they beat a team that isn't in contention to draft Caleb Williams in April, I will not be taking them seriously, and neither should you. The Jacksonville Jaguars, maybe this is bias for the color of the jersey, but until the Jacksonville Jaguars do something meaningful outside of the comeback win against the Chargers, which they're the Chargers, so of course they're going to give up a game like that. Until they do something meaningful, they're not to be taken seriously either. And the fact that they lost to Houston, which we will expand on later. And then the NFC side, on the NFC side, the Cowboys and 49ers, I have so many more questions than I do answers. We've seen the Dak playbook already. Like, we've seen this. On that last drive against the Eagles, this is a rhetorical question. I know that none of you can actually answer me in real time. On that last drive, when it was time for them to get that touchdown to win the game, did anybody think that they were going to get it? Of course not. Even when they were first and goal on the 10-yard line, nobody thought that they were going to score. That is a direct indictment on Dak Prescott, nothing else. So let's get back to the 2 and a possible. Ravens, Chiefs, Cincy. Cincy is the possible because they're heating up now. They're doing their usual. We started slow, but I'm going to get into it as the season goes on, and now we're kicking teams' asses. Let's give them some more time. They're going to play the Ravens in, I believe, 2 weeks. It's one of the Thursday night football games. 2 weeks, might be next week. So we'll see when we get there, but for now, they're possible. So let's compare the Ravens and the Chiefs. I said a couple weeks ago that the Ravens and the Chiefs are the same team in different fonts, and I still kind of feel that way, except the Ravens have significantly more impressive wins. I got some notes here about just how much the Ravens have been kicking the shit out of other teams. The Ravens have played 3 teams with winning records so far this season. They are 3-0 with a plus 91 point differential. That's college football shit. And not regular college football shit, like early college football shit, like Alabama's playing West Yucatan State college football. They are not only winning, they're beating the dog shit out of good teams. Seattle, we all thought was a good team until they walked into the bank and got dog walked. Detroit, who beat KC, we all thought was a good team until they walked into the bank and got dog walked. The Chiefs, on the other hand, their most impressive win so far, we would say, is the Dolphins this past week. The defense on the Chiefs looked great, but they're fighting for 3rd place. Let's be honest. I don't think anyone genuinely thinks that they're better than the Browns or the Ravens in terms of defense, just in terms of defense. And we look at that offense, the only impressive game that offense has had was against the Chargers, who were the worst pass defense in the league until Zach Wilson gave them a gift last night. Well, 2 nights ago by the time you're hearing this, last night as I'm recording. So the Chiefs haven't really impressed in any of their wins. And if we're just judging by this season in a vacuum, we would be calling the Chiefs fraudulent. If we were simply judging this season, Kansas City would be called fraudulent. We would say, yeah, they only have 2 losses. But if you look at that team, But they're the reigning Super Bowl champions. They have the best quarterback in football, so we can't judge it that way. So here's how I think it'll play out. Currently, KC has the number 1 seed because of some weird versus AFC opponents tiebreaker, because the Ravens' 2 losses were against AFC opponents and the Chiefs' 2 losses, one is against the NFC opponent, one's against the AFC opponent. It's weird rule shit that the NFL has when it comes to seeding, right? So I think eventually that ends with Baltimore getting the 1 seed and they just end up meeting each other in the AFC Championship, right? And when it comes to who makes the Super Bowl, let's paint this scenario. These are 2 incredible defenses. So our dream scenario of getting a 45-42 game between Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, this is not the year for that. Neither of them have the weapons to be able to pull this one off. And those defenses are going to go into each game saying, we cannot let the other quarterback beat us. When you're playing KC, that means we're shutting down Travis Kelce, and whatever other person you want to throw the ball to, have fun. And if the Broncos could do it, I guarantee you the Ravens can. For KC, the original plan used to be make Lamar Jackson throw the football. I hope that in 2023, we're smart enough to know that that's not actually the right idea. I hope that now we're smart enough as football fans and we're able to look at all the numbers and we're able to pull our Lamar Jackson biases aside to be like, hey, the man can throw the ball from the pocket. That's not a good plan. But if you're shutting down the passing offense to the Ravens and you're shutting down the passing offense to the Chiefs and they have to play left-handed, quote unquote, what do you trust more? Isaiah Pacheco running the ball and Patrick Mahomes scrambling for his life? Or do you trust Lamar Jackson and insert running back here, because running backs grow on trees in Baltimore, apparently? Me personally, I'm going to go with the Ravens on that one, because you can't stop both. You can't stop Lamar Jackson from picking you apart with the passing game and also stop him from running all over your defense. You can't stop both. That's why they've been so good this year. And what we learned from the Seattle game just now is Lamar doesn't care how they win. They scored 30 plus points. Lamar didn't score a single touchdown, throwing or running. He doesn't care. He's like, hey, we won. Who gives a damn? He even put on his IG story, I know the people who own me in fantasy are pissed. My bad, bro. I just wanted the dub. Which, that's the attitude you want your quarterback to have, right? So I'm just filled with nothing but joy when it comes to the Ravens. So in my mind, they are the number 1 contender as it currently stands. And I said it before and I'll say it again. My dream scenario, and I'm just going to keep speaking it to existence till it happens. Mid-January, Saturday or Sunday, whenever the AFC Championship game is. They switch it every year. M&T Bank, Kansas City coming into town. Lamar versus Mahomes with a trip to the Super Bowl on the line. I will be in attendance. I don't care how much the tickets cost. You can book it. Thank you for the question. Who's having the worst overall season at the moment, the Giants or the Panthers? Now, out of all the questions I got this week, this one stumped me the most, because a popular saying, I forgot who said it first, but something I kind of live my life by is success is a product of expectations. The Giants were a playoff team last year, and they just gave their quarterback $160 million after they won a playoff game. They did not expect to come into this season and only have 2 wins so far. The Panthers, on the other hand, I don't know how high expectations they had, but it wasn't, we're going to win this division and we're going to go to the playoffs and we're going to get 10 wins. And clearly that wasn't an expectation. But it wasn't be this bad and have 1 win at this point in the season. You know what I mean? They expected something more out of this team than what they're currently getting. And people complain about the weapons around Bryce Young, and a lot of that has merit to it, and I agree with most of it. But they did try, right? They may have signed the wrong people, but they did sign people. They brought in Adam Thielen. They brought in Miles Sanders, brought in DJ Chark. They tried. They just drafted an offensive lineman last year. Hasn't worked out that great so far, but they did attempt to do right by Bryce Young. It just hasn't worked out. They do have a coaching staff full of quarterback development people, but it backfired on them because every report coming out of there is it's too many chefs in the kitchen. It's too many dueling voices. It's too much going on. There's a question later on, I'm going to step on a little bit, of what 3 coaches need to get fired next. I'm paraphrasing. Frank Wright is definitely on that list, and probably the whole staff, because this current iteration is simply not working. And that's where the Giants get the one up in this, because at bare minimum, you know you got the coach. Brian Daboll took Daniel Jones to the the playoffs. Think about how crazy that sounds. Like in 5 years, when Daniel Jones is either playing in Canada or a perennial backup, we are going to look at that season and be like, yo, Brian Daboll might be the GOAT. How did he manage to take Daniel Jones to the playoffs and win a game and somehow convince the Mara family that that man was worth 160 M's? Somehow, some way he was able to pull that off. But when it comes to the worst season, I'm gonna have to go with the more hopeless side. Because if you're the Giants, like I said, you got your coach, and at bare minimum, if your season goes to complete shit, let's say they don't win another game, they end their season 2-15, they get the number 1 or number 2 pick, you either draft Caleb Williams or Drake May, cut bait with Daniel Jones and keep it pushing, or you trade that 1 or 2 pick, get a king's ransom, and be able to build around that quarterback. It's a win-win situation. If you're the Panthers and this season goes to shit, you don't have your first round pick. You have, I don't even think they have their second round pick this year. You have nothing to show for your bad season. The whole coaching staff is going to get fired and you are going to start back from square one with your quarterback. Now, the only time in the history of the NFL that is ever, well, 2 times. There's 2 times in the history of the NFL that has ever worked out. Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence. That's all. Those are the only times that when the coaching staff from a quarterback's rookie year got fired and they brought in a new one, it actually worked. Everyone else, 104-year history of the NFL, failure every single time. So I have to go with the Panthers are overall having the worst season so far. Thank you for the question. The next 2 are kind of tied together, so I'm going to just group them all at once. Where does CJ Stroud rank for you? I personally think he's playing like a top 10 quarterback right now, but I don't want to jump the gun. Next is the Texans ceiling 11 wins. So let's address the first one first. So I did a quarterback ranking on Instagram maybe a week, 2 weeks ago, and I had CJ Stroud at 10. If you're watching on the video version of this, the actual graphic of that ranking should be appearing right now. I did one this week. I had him up at 5. I can't name 5 quarterbacks that are playing better than CJ Stroud right now. I simply can't. In fact, I'm going to go a step further than what you just asked me. Can CJ Stroud win MVP? And the conversation isn't nearly as crazy as you think. Minus one part. Only one rookie has ever won MVP in the history of the NFL, and that is Jim Brown, who won Rookie of the Year and MVP in the same year in 1957. Jim Brown is arguably the greatest player to ever play in the NFL, and that happened almost 70 years ago. So this will be historic upon historic circumstances, but if you break it down and you just compare the numbers with everybody, it's not as crazy. I got this pretty little graphic up here where we're comparing CJ Stroud versus who I think are the other 3 MVP candidates: Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts. If you're listening, don't worry, I will read the stats to you. Try to keep along. I got their records, completion percentage, yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and rushing touchdowns. CJ Stroud is currently 4-4, 62% completion percentage, 2270 yards, 2,270 yards, 14 passing touchdowns, an interception, and 1 rushing touchdown. Lamar Jackson is 7-2, 71.5 completion percentage, 1,954 yards, 9 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 440 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes, 7-2, 68.6 completion percentage, 2,442 passing yards, 17 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions, no rushing touchdowns. Jalen Hurts, 8-1, 68.9% completion percentage, 2,347 passing yards, 15 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 7 rushing touchdowns, shout out to the brotherly shove, and 316 passing yards. So in terms of efficiency and taking care of the football, CJ Stroud is up there with all of them. Right now, he's on pace for 28 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. That would be slightly better than Tom Brady's, I believe it was 2009 MVP season. I'm sorry, Tom Brady had so many excellent seasons. I can't keep up with them all. You know, it's just greatness. Someone who doesn't know I'm a Patriots fan is going to hear that out of context and just think I'm an asshole. But maybe I am an asshole. Who knows? So right now, that's what he's on pace for. But if you look at the other competition, here's what's going to be the minimum that he's going to have to accomplish. Number one, he's going to have to beat Joe Burrow this week. They're playing the Bengals. I think it's a playoff preview. He has to beat Joe Burrow this week. That's when we can start jumping really deep into the, oh shit, okay, this MVP thing can actually happen. This is where that second question comes into play about the Texans' ceiling. I think their ceiling 11 wins. They're currently at 4-4, so the most they can get is 13. Let's take a look at the rest of their schedule, shall we? Again, graphic on the screen. If you're just listening, I got you. Bengals next week, Arizona Cardinals after, Jacksonville Jaguars rematch, Denver Broncos, New York Jets, Tennessee Titans, Browns, Titans again, Indianapolis Colts. I count at most 3 losses there, at most. So I think the floor for them is 9 wins, because who's to say they don't drop another one? This team just lost to the fucking Panthers last week, I'm still trying to figure that one out, how they lost to the Panthers. I don't think they know how they lost to the Panthers, but they lost. But if this MVP CJ Stroud case is going to happen, they would have to sweep the Jaguars, because they would have to win that division, which would probably mean get 12 wins, because if you're a wild card quarterback and you're going against Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts, all 3 of which could very, 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 very realistically be the 1 seed in their respective conference, yeah, that's a no-go. I don't care how good your stats are. You're not going to get that MVP. But if you pull this off, if you somehow manage to get the 12 wins, which will mean they would have to go 8-1 for the rest of their season, which again, I'm looking at this schedule, very doable. Very doable, especially if they beat the Bengals this week. Man, oh man, if they beat the Bengals this week, oh boy. If they beat the Bengals this week, 13 wins becomes realistic, because the more I look at the schedule, the more I'm like, okay, they've already beaten the Jaguars once. And I know the Jaguars are 6-2 or 5-2 or whatever the hell they are, but I just, they don't move the needle for me. And I know Trevor Lawrence is everyone's golden boy. I know he is, but maybe it's the uniforms. Maybe I'm just being biased because my entire life outside of the Jalen Ramsey, Leonard Fournette year, the Jaguars have been terrible, but they just don't move the needle for me. But to directly answer your questions, I think the Texans' ceiling is 12 wins. I think CJ Stroud is the 5th best quarterback as it currently stands, simply based on this season. Obviously, this isn't a lifetime achievement award at quarterback. I don't think that's particularly fair to a quarterback who's been playing NFL football for 10 weeks. I don't know how we would fairly have him in that category, to be honest. So by now you might think, all right, what does that top 10 quarterback actually look like? Don't you worry, your sweet, pretty little head. I am going to show you in 1 second. So again, I said I have CJ Stroud at 5. The 4 quarterbacks that I have ahead of him in order: Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow. I think that's fair. I can't argue that he's playing better than any of those 4. The best argument I can make would be for Joe Burrow, because he just started playing like Joe Burrow again like 2 weeks ago, really. But we know he's Joe Burrow again now. So that's a tough sell. It's a very tough sell to be like, all right, here goes this rookie with 10 games of evidence. He is now better than a quarterback that's been to the Super Bowl and is now playing like a quarterback who's been to the Super Bowl before. No go. Here are the 5 quarterbacks I have under him: Josh Allen, Jared Goff, Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence, and then Justin Herbert barely makes the list at 10. Tua was originally in that top 5. I think I had him at 4 before. But again, the not beating teams that aren't in we should probably tank territory, it's rough for me. It's rough. Josh Allen is way too in love with turning the football over for my comfort. And Buffalo Bills fans, of course, they're going to defend their guy. They're one of the most passionate fan bases in the league, and I love them for it. But if they're honest with themselves, they're annoyed at that shit too. They're like, all right, Josh, we're kind of sick of you throwing the balls to the other team when you're supposed to be one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in football. We don't need you to get it together. Jared Goff was playing at an MVP level. He was in MVP conversations no more than 3 weeks ago. That Baltimore game completely changed how we look at Jared Goff. That's just a rap ski. Trevor Lawrence, again, he's there because of the record, and he is actually playing pretty well. We expected him to take a major leap this year. The leap isn't as big as we thought it would be, but it's a leap. The leap is there. Justin Herbert is finally getting that Chargers team back into shape so he could be a little more proud of where he is now. But we will revisit this CJ Stroud for MVP conversation after this Bengals game, because oh boy, if he wins. Oh baby, if he wins. All right, last question of the day. What are 3 coaches that need to be fired next? This one is very personal for me. Send Arthur Smith to the moon. This arrogant Nepo baby Super Mario looking bastard. Oh my God. It's not just that he's misusing the greatest supporting cast this side of San Francisco in the league. It's the fact he's so arrogant arrogant about it. Like, we're the dumb ones for saying that, hey, man, maybe you should give Bijan Robinson the ball when you're inside the 5-yard line. Hey, bro, you got a 6'6" tight end that runs a 4.5. You want to throw him the ball every once in a while? That Drake London guy that you have playing receiver, he's pretty good. Matt Collins is like 6'5". He's great. Hey, Desmond Ridder from the beginning of the season, we all said, not the guy. And now he agrees with us, not the guy. A reminder again, they could have had Lamar Jackson. And usually when teams make bad decisions, they pick someone to throw under the bus. He's the guy they're throwing under the bus for the Lamar Jackson decision. And because people like me already don't rock with Arthur Smith, we're inclined to believe them. But it enforces my narrative, so I will. He said no to Lamar Jackson in favor of Desmond Ridder. Send him to the moon. And matter of fact, take Desmond with him. The next two are cop-out answers, but you'll see what I'm saying. So coach number 2/2A, 2B, whoever loses the Panthers and Bears game, that coach will not be employed by Saturday morning. That is definitely a loser leaves town game between Eberflus and Frank Reich. I think those fan bases are just sick of it. They're ready for somebody to leave. Chicago, they tried to do the whole Tyson Bagent, oh my God, our white savior off the bench has come to save us from our terrible black quarterback. And then he threw 3 picks. And then he looked terrible on national TV. I said the order wrong, but you get what I'm saying. He looked terrible on national TV against the Chargers. And then they're like, all right, well, I guess we got to put Justin Fields back in there. Eberflus is out of there. Regardless of whether they keep Justin Fields next year or not, or bring in a new quarterback, they're not bringing in another quarterback that Eberflus is going to be able to ruin. They're going to bring in some way, shape, or form a new coaching in. I feel like it's going to be Jim Harbaugh. So it's just delaying the inevitable that Eberflus is not going to be there next year. And if they lose to the Panthers, that inevitable is going to be at least before Saturday. Frank Reich, we talked about earlier, but that situation it's already a dumpster fire right now. And as an offensive mastermind, quote unquote, and quarterback guru, once you give up play calling duties, that's essentially you raising your hand and being like, all right, guys, I'm the problem. It's my fault. I did this to the team. And if I take my hands off the wheel a little bit, maybe we'll be better. They won the first game after he took the hands off the wheel to the quarterback who's lighting it up in the league that now they claim they really wanted over Bryce Young, but the owner said no. Okay. So that's cop-out answer number 1. Cop-out answer number 2, whoever misses the playoffs between the Bills and the Chargers, that coach is getting fired. There's a possibility that both of them miss the playoffs and both of them are going to get fired. This is not because they are bad coaches. It is because you have to take the results and compare them to your competition and look at your talent. Josh Allen and Justin Herbert should be top 5 quarterbacks in the league, but this season they are not. Like, plain and simple, they haven't been. Their teams have not been top 5 teams. They're both top 5 talents, but they're both severely underachieving. There is a strong chance the Bills don't make the playoffs. The Chargers, if not for this recent 2-game winning streak we're in, we might have number 1 pick territory not too long ago. And if you have that level of quarterback talent that both have been recently given good contracts, I don't know how you can look at your conference with Mahomes, Jackson, Burrow, and think, all right, we're just going to roll the same regime back out there again, even though we missed the playoffs. Not even lost to them in the playoffs. Missed the playoffs. Someone's head is going to have to roll, and obviously it's not going to be the quarterbacks. So that's the very logical next decision. Thank you for the question. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be right back. All right, last closing segment, and then we're going to go get out of here. Let y'all enjoy the rest of your week. I question how much you people actually enjoy basketball. And this is one of those if the shoe fits, wears it situation, because I'm not talking about everybody. I'm only talking about a select group of people. But there's a lot of you who get to questioning the whole off-season tournament thing. Why should I care? What incentive is there for the fans to care about the off-season tournament? I don't care if these players get an extra $500,000. Do you like basketball or not? It's really that simple. Do you enjoy watching competitive basketball or do you not? Because all the in-season tournament is doing is giving the players more incentive to give a fuck about the regular season. That's all. Before we even get to the actual games that happened last Friday, I'm just going to paint a picture of what the regular season is going to look like now that we have this in-season tournament. In-season tournament goes from November to December, to early mid-December. So keep that in mind. Season starts mid to late October. So we're starting. Can't rest when you first start. Everyone got to get the lineups together, see what we got, see what we need. Everyone get a feel for each other. Can't rest then. Great. Go from there. Right when you start to get a groove, in-season tournament time. Got to get that extra $500,000. Might not mean nothing to the guy with the max contract, but for my man with the two-way contract at the bottom of the bench who practices with with y'all every day, you have this rapport with, and for the sake of keeping team chemistry, you better care about this tournament, because if you fold and he knows you folded, oh yeah, he's gone for the rest of the season because you just cost them $500,000. That'll take you near Christmas. Now we're at Christmas. Christmas games on national TV. Gotta care about Christmas. After the Christmas games, gotta make the push for the All-Star game. Gotta push for the All-Star game. Gotta make it. This for the legacy. I don't even know where All-Star game is this year, but I'm pretty sure it's somewhere important. Last year was in Utah for some odd reason. I don't know whose idea that was, but you know, oh Lord, this year's no better. This year it's in Indianapolis. Hey, Adam Silver, the All-Star break is supposed to be a reward for the players. Don't have it anywhere cold. Don't have it anywhere that strip clubs are not readily available. You know your league. What are you doing? Anyways, go to the All-Star, get a little break afterwards. Now we got to make a playoff push. So from February to April, got to make a push. Now tell me where in that span is there time for a break? My point exactly. So I'm not saying that the in-season tournament is the best thing to happen to basketball since we stopped wearing Converse or whatever. Like, I'm not saying it's God's gift to the sport. However, for everyone to sit here and complain about this as fans, it's crazy to me. It's more competitive basketball at a time of year where if you're a fan of the sport, you're probably gonna watch anyways. Why do you care? Like, why are you so upset that on a Friday night, instead of turning into ESPN and watching the Warriors without Steph Curry, instead you get 141 to 139 against Oklahoma City with Steph hitting a game-winning shot? Why are you upset about that? Instead of a throwaway game between the Brooklyn Nets and the Chicago Bulls, how's 109 to 107 sound? Sound good? Sounds good to me too. New York and Milwaukee, the other ESPN game. Dame Lillard closing out the game late, 110 to 105, Milwaukee beats the Knicks. Even Memphis, who is winless, and Portland, who's struggling, 115 to 113 in overtime. So you think the players care? I think so. I think the proof's in the pudding that the players give a fuck just a little bit. What's there to complain about as fans? Matter of fact, there's one thing. There's one thing that I have no argument against if you're complaining about as a fan. It doesn't bother me, but if it bothers you, I feel you. The courts are ridiculous. The courts are ridiculous. It looks like something we made up in 2K, my team. That 100% on your side. There was no point for the courts. I don't know why they did it, but they did it. They're here to stay. We got to live. But I just don't understand. Enjoy the competitive basketball. That's all. Whether it's regular ESPN game, regular TNT game, the Riders Cup, the Renona's Cup, Mario Ride Cup, who cares what it is called? It is competitive NBA basketball. Who gives a shit? Just enjoy it. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. And if you're staying this long through the rambling, I appreciate you. Like, follow, subscribe to everywhere at BKA Beloved. Rate this podcast, share it with your friends. Make sure they know what it's lit over here. I've been Kev BKA Beloved. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.